Thank you so much for joining us on the Voice of Job Seekers. This is Mark, your host, and I am glad to announce that I will be back next fall. Thank you so much for listening to the award-winning The Voice of Job Seekers podcast. I'm Mark, your host, and I'm always hacking and reimagining an easier job search for you. I bring you relevant voices and relatable voices to help you clear the path to discover successful ways to find the job that you were meant to have. This is the last show of the season. I wasn't kidding. And of course, another year of modern job search tips and techniques were explored, and perhaps exploited as well. And many of you have implemented successfully. Listen, just because the podcast will be on hiatus until September 11th doesn't mean the content will stop coming your way on thevoiceofjobseekers.com. Article guides and even videos will be coming your way. I'll also be working on some other projects, money-making projects, preferably, please. So I've got some things going. Summer gives me a chance to totally focus on that, build it out for the rest of the year, and to keep things moving as far as me personally, and to take a couple of trips here and there. But nevertheless, looking forward to a great summer, and I hope that you will have a great summer as well. Again, articles, guides, and videos will be coming your way, especially in the fall. Let me give you an idea what will be coming for the new season. It's going to start in September 12th. There will be more panel shows. Not so much the one person ask, another answer, but there'll be more panel discussion. So there's likely to be 2 or more guests on those shows. So look forward to that. It will sound a little bit different as well than what you're used to, though I will have some very specific targeted guests that I have that I'm starting to line up for next year. Already have a couple of people who've said yes. And yes, I do plan that far ahead. There'll be an updated job search guide for 2019. They'll be full of even more tips and techniques and tactics for your job search, especially if you're in that mode. Of course, we've already talked about already that you should always remain in job search mode. There's no more disengagement. We're going to keep our eyes at least focused on the front, like a quarterback does when he's passing. He's always looking downfield, and that's what you want to do. You want to keep looking downfield or towards the future. I'm hoping to do 1 or 2 live events. There are a couple of possibilities that I have that still need to be worked out. I'm hoping that September 11th will be a live event, and of course, I don't talk about anniversaries much, and I haven't in the past, but that will be the 5th anniversary of the podcast. And I should also mention July is the 7th year of the blog. There are 7 years worth of content there on thevoiceofjobseekers.com, lots of it. There's more than 500 at this particular point. So if you need some help for your job search, the resources and articles and tips, all kinds of things are there in video form, a lot of audio, and a whole lot more articles as well as some of the e-guides that I have there currently. I'm also going to have, as part of the podcast, shows where I've been interviewed on other podcasts or radio stations. You've already experienced that a couple of weeks ago with a radio interview that I had here in Chicago on WVON. That is in the archives. You can look for that. It was 2 or 3 shows ago. And this particular episode is going to be a Q&A. So with Mark Miller, who's the captain of the ship over there at the Repurpose Your Career podcast. So hope you stay tuned for that. And there'll be more Q&A episodes of all sorts. particularly with Mark, which if all the other ones go well, then I'll present them to you on my podcast as well, as he's already given the okay to do that. So you're going to hear a lot of different types of content and help for your job search. And, we're all about hacking the job search process and reimagining it to make it easier for you. There'll be about 8 shows in the fall, possibly a little bit more, but every other week, except for Thanksgiving week, where November will have just 1 episode. Today, again, the last episode for this season will be Q&A with Mark Miller. And you'll note the show notes are brief on my end because Mark has already created a very detailed show notes for the episode to follow. To follow the link in the show notes, so you can go and you can read the notes in its entirety. And that just all proves when Mark says he's a recovering engineer, he really means it. I mean, they're in detail. If you have not signed up for the free guide, 118 job search tips for the modern job seeker in 2018, go to the show notes for the link there, or you can go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com. You can press the tab that says free e-guide. I would love your feedback for shows, articles, videos, or any suggestions for the next year's show. So feel free to give me a call at 708-365-9822, or you can email me at mark@thevoiceofjobseekers.com, or you can use the speak pike button right there on the right side. It's in red. You press it. It'll activate your mic laptop, and then you can just leave a message. I love it when recently there's been several of you who've used that, and I appreciate it. Next year, I hope to, during the Q&A, I hope to play back some of those questions that you all have, and play it back on the air. And, of course, if you have a suggestion or a tip for job seekers, you can also leave it there on SpeakPipe, especially if if you happen to be a writer and you have a blog and you're a career coach or a resume writer that has one of those, then if you leave your information like your name and your website, I will put it on the air. How about that? Give you credit and give people a chance to reach out to you if you have a great tip as well. Always welcome them. We'll play them on any show anytime that I may have it. I might compile some and just have a show full of suggestions and where you can get in contact with that coach or consultant or writer. In the meantime, I hope you have a great summer. I hope you won't be shy on the social networks. I hope that you will come and still check out the content on thevoiceofjobseekers.com. In the meantime, thank you very much. I want to present to you episode 81 from Repurpose Your Career, where Mark and I are answering all types of job search questions, and some of them may fit you. If you have a question about anything we've talked about, would love to hear from you. You might end up on an episode of Repurpose Your Career or thevoiceofjobseekers.com. So here you go. This is episode 1, Repurpose Your Career with Mark Miller and myself. You have a great summer, and this does not mean goodbye. This just means just taking a little time off. That's all. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great summer.
So in this week's episode, I will be answering your questions along with my good friend and career colleague, Mark Anthony Dyson from the Voice of the Job Seeker podcast. Welcome, Mark.
Yes. Hey, how are you, Mark?
I'm doing well. And I'm here in Austin, Texas, and you are in
Chicago once again.
Yes. And we're probably about the same temperature. We're in the 90s.
Yeah, we're creeping right there. We're close to it.
So why don't we just hop in right into the questions that our listeners have submitted?
Super. So ready for question one?
Yes, I am ready for question one.
I am a 61-year-old floor installer. I've been doing this since I was a young man. I have worked in other parts of the industry like sales and distribution, but I like to work by myself. I no longer install carpeting because of the weight. I do not know how much longer I can continue to do this. I'm incredibly good at finding the methods to install the ever-changing product offerings that the vinyl and wood flooring industry come up with every year. What can I do? I cannot physically keep this up.
Does this sound familiar?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Too often. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I, in my 20s, installed 700 square feet of Spanish tile in my house. Mm-hmm. In 2010, when we sold it, I wasn't happy with how the folks that were cleaning the house up and repainting were dealing with some of the Spanish tile. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to get down there and strip it myself and reseal it. Mm-hmm. You know what? It was a lot easier doing that in my 20s than in my 50s.
Sure.
When I had a discussion with this gentleman, he was talking about the fact that he was just really good at coming up with all the tips and tricks on how to install this vinyl flooring. And there's a lot of DIY now. Mm-hmm. And I'm even noticed that in my own condo. The gentleman who before me put in the bamboo flooring and he screwed it up in places.
Yeah.
Right. And I even learned when I did my own flooring, when I did that Spanish tile, I learned things like, my living room wasn't square. The bar extension wasn't exactly straight. And these guys know how to do that. So sure. I thought to myself, okay, what can he do that gets him out of doing the direct installing? And the first thing I came up with was, wow, why don't you look at doing YouTube videos? So I got online and started looking about DIY floor installation. And there were a small number, probably 100 videos out there. But some of them had 1 million views. And I thought, well, this is easy to do. It's at least something worth to try, right? Get somebody, he has a son who's good with an iPhone. I said, why don't you try creating some of these videos? And the fact is he was talking about the fact that the product set changes every single year. In other words, the vinyl and wood flooring industry comes out with new products and they all don't quite install quite the same. And I said, well, why don't you try creating YouTube videos? See whether that gets you any traction. What do you think of that?
Well, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And I was just trying to, they may seem a little dumb, but I need to know. Now, he says he no longer installs carpeting because of the weight. Does he mean his weight?
No.
Or does he mean
the weight of the carpeting?
Weight of the carpeting. Okay, that was important information because, if it was because of his weight, then there would be some health questions I would be interested to know in order to, kind of get the right perspective. But YouTube videos are great for the long haul. Now, I don't know what his financial situation is. Was he looking to do something right away? Was he comfortable, but he wants to keep on working? What is his MO, career MO, if we could put it that way?
Well, the point is he was financially doing okay what he was doing. He just knows that in 5 years, he can't be doing this.
Okay. All right. So that's a missing piece that we're working with here, because if he's, like a lot of Americans, according to a Career Builder study recently, or back in 2017, 78 of employees and probably business owners as well are living paycheck to paycheck. So it was important to know how quickly he needs to turn around his aspirations into something that's viable. If he has some leeway, not only YouTube videos would be fantastic, or even a podcast along those lines. But consulting is really and training is really a great way to get out of the mire and the stress of installing carpet. I know that could be really helpful if he wants to do that kind of thing. There's the other aspect that he could possibly be a really good referrer as well. He might know the businesses that can do a lot of the heavy lifting. He might be able to do some of the lighter stuff, and they, in return for the referral, might be able to give him a decent fee if he's able to negotiate with them as to how much they would pay him.
Yeah, he said he'd been through the sales and distribution. If you go back and listen to one of the early episodes, Mike O'Krent, who has a business called Life Stories Alive, he came out of the carpeting business. Mm-hmm. And the flooring business has gotten, from a sales perspective, nasty. Because of things like Home Depot. It's very, very transactional. Mm-hmm. So he was kind of going, okay, what can I do? And I like the idea of a podcast. Mm-hmm. Even more is, figuring out how you can be a consultant. Hopefully that'll give him some ideas.
Yeah, the Home Depot thing is not a bad thing either. I mean, there are businesses that work as a third-party consultant with Home Depot. Some of them, I guess it might depend how they're owned or if they're franchised or not. I've heard of people actually going in to train the employees on certain some of the technologies and different aspects of. I've heard that done with plumbing. I haven't heard that done with flooring, but I'm sure there are. There's somebody that possibly could. You got to explore all the options, but I think the main thing is to get out of the physical aspect and get into something where you're not doing all. Let the young guys handle all and the young girls even to handle all the flooring. I want to be politically correct here.
Yes.
But keep this in mind. But that's where I would run with it, and I think you're right. Also, if I can add too, SCORE is you probably know, it's an organization that has a lot of the older executive, old management that and business owners that consult for free. If you go to somewhere local or if you contact score.org, they would be a great resource for many people who are kind of at that part of life where, they can, use some ideas on how to shift their business or shift the future of their business.
And if you go back a few podcasts episode, I had Joe Harper from the Small Business Development Center here in Central Texas. Small business development centers are all over the country. Sometimes they partner with SCORE. Sometimes they're independent. So good advice. Let's go on to question 2. Okay, Mark. After years of corporate training, I took time off to raise my daughter. She is graduating high school in 2 weeks, and I'm ready to get back into training. A few of my challenges. I haven't used much of the new technology since 2008. I haven't spoken in front of an audience since 2009. I haven't worked since 2009. Not sure where to begin. Thanks for your help and advice.
This is the part where there was a lot more in-depth conversation like yourself. I hadn't taken that person on as a client, but because I had a relationship with that person, I went into a little bit more in depth than I usually would. Really, if it's a matter of getting used to a lot of the new technologies, there's some that haven't changed a whole lot, as we talked about her, and that they're easily adaptable, such as PowerPoint. It hasn't changed dramatically as much to where you couldn't catch on. And a lot of the technologies from like Microsoft Word and Office and some of the other software where you're going to be using it for business and using it for other things. It hasn't changed dramatically in that sense, so it's not that hard to acclimate. What has changed is the way that you're going to market yourself and the way that you're going to make yourself marketable. And that's where social media, she hadn't had much social media experience other than using Facebook for fun and for family. So that was one of the things that came across. The thing that we got down to is getting her name in front of people that matter and that will give her opportunities again. So we talked a lot about contracting, and contracting could lead into getting a position again. Since she's in the late 40s, tipping on the 50s, it's not going to be as easy buy, although there are people who are getting hired. I've had a couple of people recently in my circle that are older and that have gotten hired by corporations. So the thing is just getting enough of that information out there to where even you can build some social proof, putting it out there on your LinkedIn profile, building a great profile along with a resume. But the profile, you can exhibit some of the samplings of your work. And fortunately, she had one or two videos that just needs to be converted from being on cassette, video cassette, to a CD or to a digital file, and you can do that at Walmart. Walmart has that service. Not all Walmarts have that service, but you can convert those files to a digital file and then put that up on your profile as well as proof as you having done that in front of an audience. We got down to nitty-gritty as far as probably more time than we actually had. But those are some of the things that she's actively doing now. And she's got something at the library where she can go train and then document that on a weekly basis.
This is a world that I came out of in 2011. It's interesting. When I was at my last startup, I was developing a curriculum and certification program that was both stand-up and online. Mm-hmm. And since then, so much has gone online. And so one of the things I've had people who have been traditional trainers, I say, okay, one of the things I want you to do is look at all the job ads and see what tools are they using. Are they using Captivate, Articulate, Storyline, their whole set of them. And the idea is go pick one and learn it. These are not hard tools. If you understand instructional design, they're actually pretty easy to learn. Then you can start saying, okay, I have the stand-up training background, which also means you've probably done curriculum development. Now you can also say, I want to translate that into the online, and I actually have some experience. In the last episode, I interviewed Carol Cohen-Fishman, who runs iRelaunch, and they have a whole package put together on these people doing what they call their relaunchers. They're people who've taken a career break. And one of the key aspects is they want to, in fact, the quote at the beginning of the podcast was, employers are more interested that you have the fire to learn the new technology than being completely up to date on the new technology. And there's so much you can get on LinkedIn Learning and other platforms that it's, as I said, if you're a good trainer, this stuff is not hard to pick up, but you do have to kind of go stretch yourself.
Yeah, and I think, too, you have to consider that you're also, to get back in, there's got to be some marketing and some PR that you're willing to do that you haven't done yet, especially if you haven't been in the market 10 years. It's one thing to learn the new technology, but you've got to get in front of people. And you got to get in front of the right eyes and find the right people that can either promote you, hire you, or at least pass the word. And that's kind of hard to do. People are not willing to do that just because you say so, or that when you say I used to be, some people's ears just start to shut down. I used to be, meaning I'm becoming, old and irrelevant, which for her is not the case. For her, it's just it's a part of it is just a marketing aspect of it, but the other part is too, you got to be doing something. You got to be active in showing that you are displaying some relevancy. But yeah, all those things that Udemy and LinkedIn even have to offer these days, even some that might cost a little bit of money, you can find. There's specials going on all the time. Go on Groupon and look for online learning. I've seen some that offer 5 or 6 week courses for $10. So the minimal investment there is, but you're correct, and we hit on some of that. A lot of it is just overcoming the fear of the unknown. Just overcoming that, you're hearing all these voices that really don't exist inside your head. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's sort of like you had a term for it, even.
MSU?
Yes, making stuff up. Yeah. I think that is very relevant as I begin to hear people that talk more about, they'll mention the technology, they'll mention they haven't been in front of an audience, but a lot of it was, I'm not sure. And when you're not sure, you begin to make up narratives that don't exist.
Well, this leads us right into question 3.
I am 65 years old, and I've been an IT consultant, interim CIO for the last 25 years. I want to finish my career as a full-time employee as a CIO at a small to medium-sized business. I'm completely unable to convince people that I'm worth the risk. I have worked in so many industries that everyone says I do not have the necessary industry experience, and I get passed over. What should I do?
This was a conversation I had yesterday. How often do you get someone who's been a consultant for 25 years and say, I want to be a full-time employee now. And because he's 65, he doesn't need healthcare because he has Medicare available. I went, wow, you want to come back as a full-time employee? No one's going to believe you. And I've run into this over and over again with people who've been consultants. And I said, and what he'd been doing was just applying and applying and applying. And he was getting interviews. But when it all came down, I told him, I said, no one's going to believe you. Right. So what you need to do is go back to all these companies that you've consulted with over these many last 10 years, 15 years. Go back and talk to them. Those are all weak ties. And you should be able to go in there and saying, you know what I can do. In other words, his next job has to come through a relationship. He needs to work the relationships. And he hadn't been doing that at all. Or as I like to say, he needed to work his weak ties. He had been working through these interim CIO, C-suite, placement services. And the interesting problem he had was he'd go in for 6 months to a year. And part of his contract was he could not go work for them for a year to 2 years. So he couldn't go in and consult and then say, okay, I want to stay on, because it was negotiated from the front that he couldn't do that. And I said, okay, you're either going to have to go find your next gig and turn it into, as I like to say, date for a job, or more importantly, go back over all these people you've known over the last 20 years. And I would very, very methodically go back and reconnect and go, and the key word to use is, I'm looking for some advice. What do you think I should do? Don't go in asking for a job, because a lot of these people will run away. He's done so much stuff over so many years. And oh, by the way, when you finally get done talking to everyone, or as you get down, you need to narrow down to a industry, not 5 industries, 1. And I get people, I want to do more than 1. Okay, 2.
That's an interesting insight, because I was kind of headed that way, in the sense of, and my question to you was going to be, so what industries has he been a part of? Because CIOs, if he's getting interim assignments, and he's had a number of them, then I won't say that they're a dime a dozen, but it's a pretty broad stroke. If there was one that he was a part of for a longer period of time than several months, that might be where his expertise might rely because of the time that he's put in. But it's kind of hard to say.
He had, like, for example, he run a large project for implementing a 911 implementation in a major city. And that was one he found himself, but he couldn't follow on because they wanted people with fire department experience. By the way, this is incredibly common, and that's where you have to pick an industry and go demonstrate you have the industry knowledge.
I think your advice is right on.
What I have found is people who are very likable will make an impression. And I suspect this gentleman had made an impression with a lot of people, and he'd been on a lot of high profile projects. The key piece here is, and you know, his resume went all the way back to the 1970s.
Oh yeah.
And I said, no. You know, his LinkedIn profile went all the way back to the 1970s. Yeah. I've been in technology. No one in the technology world, no one cares about anything from before 2000.
Well, nobody cares really at this point before 2010.
Yeah.
I think the understanding here for a lot of us who are older is that anything outside of 2 years when it comes to technology are light years. It's a way, I mean, technology has surpassed us if we haven't been in the realm. Having said that, I think that relationships kind of are the same way. If you haven't been keeping up with those relationships, even if you're likable, it makes for a very interesting discussion. And I'm not talking about, the people catching up with you in the past or what you've done in the past. Having said that, I think that, there's a likability factor that he has that he can generate some interest in his service, possibly over time, maybe even get them to refer him to companies that are in need right now. But I don't know if I can give any better advice than what you've given him, especially the focus part.
Yep.
Is relatively important because at 65, especially, you got to be a master of something, and you should market yourself and you should present yourself that way. If not a master, at least a ninja of some sort. But whatever it is, it's you can't just say I want to be a CIO. Like there's plenty of people, and you've had them say I want to be a CEO, I want to be an executive. You want to be an executive of what? you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's kind of, I think you've given him the best advice that's out there.
Well, thank you, Mark, for helping on this podcast.
Sure.